Deploying any military forces outside national territory must require a national referendum. This must be a requirement for all foreign combat deployments. Going to war as a nation or sending a small military task force must both require a referendum. This includes joining an internationally sanctioned peacekeeping mission or sending forces to assist another nation with natural disaster responses. All overseas deployment of military forces must require a referendum. Any exceptions could be abused and used by leaders to get involved in military operations overseas. Politicians, whether it's the heads of state or in legislative bodies, must not be able to decide whether a nation deploys its military. The population will bear the costs of military operations in the form of taxes or literally their lives. And so they must be the ones that collectively make the decision to get involved in military operations. Once a military deployment is approved with a referendum, it must be reapproved every 2 years with another referendum. This allows the population to re-evaluate the situation and change their minds if they want to. Requiring referendums to deploy military forces and maintain military operations makes it less likely that nations will go to war, and it makes it less likely that conflicts will drag on for too long. Voting in referendums to decide on military actions must be compulsory. In voluntary systems, the lowest socioeconomic classes in society tend to vote less frequently. But in war, the lowest socioeconomic groups tend to be the ones that die most frequently. This is because they are often the ones at the front lines in lower level positions within the military. They are the ones that die most frequently and absorb the enemy fire first. So referendums to go to war must be compulsory because we need everyone, including lower socioeconomic groups, to vote on whether or not the country should go to war. The disconnection between who does or doesn't vote in a voluntary system, but who dies in a conflict, weakens the legitimacy of the political system. It's also fundamentally unfair that rich people send poor people off to fight in wars that help protect the wealth of rich people. This in turn undermines social cohesiveness, institutional trust in the society, compliance with the rule of law, and the long-term stability of the system as a whole. Having a compulsory referendum is essential because it ensures that most of the population genuinely supports any military action the country takes. The referendum needed to continue military action must also be compulsory for the same reasons. The defense of internal national territory must not require a referendum. If national territory is attacked, a country must be able to defend itself quickly and decisively without spending time doing a referendum. Before this can happen, national territory must be clearly defined across all land, water, and air borders. The boundaries of national territory must be internationally acknowledged and widely endorsed. This is necessary because it makes it clear when enemy military forces enter national territory. Attacks on installations or equipment located within foreign borders, such as diplomatic embassies or naval vessels, must not count as an attack on national territory. Otherwise, this risks allowing military reactions without requiring a referendum. Any combat deployment outside the predefined national territory for any reason whatsoever must always require a compulsory national referendum. Any defensive action that takes place without a referendum must keep all military forces within the predefined national territory. If long-range attacks come from outside the national territory, a referendum is not required to act militarily to stop those attacks. For example, if national territory is attacked with long-range missiles or artillery strikes coming from outside national territory. However, any defensive military operations that take place outside national territory to stop long-range attacks must be strictly limited to destroying just the hardware that is needed to make those long-range attacks. Wherever possible, they should be executed using long-range hardware of our own, rather than sending in ground forces. The aim is to limit loss of life on both sides and avoid undertaking military invasions and occupations. If defensive operations to stop long-range attacks last longer than 1 month, then they must require a referendum to continue. This allows countries to defend themselves if they're attacked, but these kinds of attacks must not be preemptive. The enemy must attack first in these situations. This avoids being responsible for starting avoidable conflicts. Countries that require referendums to engage in external military deployments should only form alliances with other countries that have the same referendum requirements. This helps avoid the risk of getting drawn into conflicts by an ally that doesn't require referendums, that behaves in a very confrontational or belligerent way. Political elites in allied countries that don't have a referendum could provoke external rivals and start a conflict by making those rivals attack them. Allied countries would then be required to assist in military operations to honor the alliance agreement. It's very important to avoid making alliances with any country that does not also have a referendum. Avoiding alliances with non-referendum countries will help avoid getting drawn into external conflicts. Each country only focuses on their own self-defense, and the alliance is only to engage in self-defense. The alliance would not permit joining an ally in an overseas offensive military operation. Making an alliance must require a referendum. Undoing an alliance must also require a referendum. But once an alliance is formed and in place, a referendum is not required to deploy to the allies' national territory, but only to their territory. This helps keep the alliance commitment more credible, because a referendum is not required to defend your ally. It also avoids the possibility of the population voting not to honor the alliance. So once an alliance is in place, a referendum is not required to defend your ally's national territory. But this does not allow military forces to support your ally if that ally is engaging in overseas operations. However, the ally must formally request and invite military assistance. This formality ensures better cooperation and avoids unnecessarily getting involved in conflicts. But the same rules of self-defense apply, and the military cannot be deployed to invade another country without a compulsory national referendum. The defense of any allied home territory should not require a referendum. Allowing for the automatic defense of allied home territory provides the necessary level of deterrence to make alliances effective. However, this should not cover attacks on allied installations or equipment located within other foreign borders. The risk is once again that such allowances would make it too easy to trigger a non-referendum alliance response. Countries that require a referendum to deploy their military forces externally will tend to be less belligerent and confrontational on the international scene. This means there is less risk of getting drawn into unnecessary conflicts by forming alliances with other countries that also require national referendums to deploy their forces. Allies may become threatened or attacked by belligerent rivals and need assistance. Countries must then be able to act decisively and quickly to defend the home territory of their allies without resorting to a referendum to do so. A very important condition of any alliance is that military forces can only be deployed to the home territory of the alliance partner. It can be defended in the same way as home territory, meaning attacks on any hardware launching long-range attacks from outside the territory is permissible, but only to the extent necessary to destroy the hardware conducting those attacks. Special covert operations to destroy the hardware would only be permissible as a last resort. In the first instance, missiles and long-range attacks would be used to neutralize any long-range attacks on your ally's territory. An alliance condition must also specify that the supplied allied forces cannot enter external territory. They can only stay on the home territory of the ally. They can be used to secure and defend the ally's home territory while the ally uses its own forces to prevent long-range attacks using its special covert operations. The aim is to make alliances a credible deterrence to attack without risking getting involved in unnecessary conflicts. The conditions allow for a country to defend itself and its allies from long-range attacks with minimal intervention in external territories